good morning to all the participants. What I would like to do is briefly discuss about genetic algorithms and their applications for optimal reservoir operation. Now here, first of all, I would like to acknowledge my former PhD student, Professor M. Jangareddy, who is now a professor in IIT Bombay. What I am presenting, some of the case studies are the work that is done by him. And I would also be referring to one or two papers that we have published together. So with due acknowledgements to my former student, what we will do is we'll briefly discuss about the GA and where it stands or where it fits in the overarching goal of using soft computing techniques. And then within that, we'll talk about how do we if you don't know anything in this field, don't worry, we'll start from the scratch. Okay, so we talk about genetic algorithms, how they have come into picture and how they can be used for optimization, and then how they can be used for constrained optimization. Then we'll try to illustrate the GA application for optimization with some classroom examples. Then I'll extend it to go for case studies of real world problems, single as well as multi-objective reservoir operation. So in the process, we will also discuss various nitty-gritties that are involved in using GA, and we'll briefly discuss about what is the future scope in this domain in terms of its advancements and how they can be utilized for solving much more nonlinear optimization problems. So first of all, let me try to give the context of optimization methods that are available or in vogue, and then where these GA algorithms or GA fits into that entire domain. So if you talk about optimization methods, okay, we have basically under two broad categories called combinatorial optimization as well as continuous optimization. Combinatorial actually comes under discrete optimization approach. So here we have exact approaches which can try to get the solution for combinatorial optimization, or we have approximate approaches. And within continuous, we have nonlinear as well as linear. And when we talk about linear, one of the most popular optimization algorithm is linear programming, which is solved through simplex method and many of its variants like revised simplex method or Gaussian projection algorithm or Karmaker's algorithm, etc. So they're all basically used for solving linear programming problems, which are also used for interior point search algorithm, especially the Karmaker's algorithm. Now, that's one aspect for continuous optimization. Other one is nonlinear, where we try to talk about global search methods as well as local search methods. In local search methods, again, we talk about gradient based or without any gradient requirement. We try to talk about local search methods. But if we try to talk about global search methods, which actually tries to come under the purview of, again, combinatorial approximate methods. Okay, so there we can talk about heuristic, meta-heuristic, and random search approaches. And within them, if you focus on meta-heuristic, we have again single solution based search or population based search. In talk about single solution based search approaches, we have what are known as simulated annealing or taboo search. They are quite popular, where you try to look for one solution at a time. Whereas in a population-based search, we look for many potential solutions, and among them we try to pick up the best solution. That is exploratory approach. So in population-based search, again, we have evolutionary algorithms and swarm intelligence-based approaches. And within evolutionary algorithms, we talk about genetic algorithms, differential evolution, evolutionary strategies, evolutionary programming, shuffled complex evolution programming, and many other techniques. And when talk about swarm intelligence, where it tries to utilize the local or a particle intelligence as well as swarm intelligence together. Okay, and there we try to talk about various approaches, and among them most popular one is particle swarm optimization, then ant colony optimization, honeybee mating optimization, firefly algorithm, shuffled frog leaping algorithm, cuckoo search, and many other such algorithms are available, which are all based on a specified population. And within that population, which we call a swarm, a group, okay, and within that swarm, we try to utilize the particles or individual intelligence as well as the collective intelligence to search for optimal solution. So in this entire gamut of optimization methods that are available to us, what we'll be discussing today is this particular one, genetic algorithms. So as I mentioned to you, this entire thing, all these different optimization approaches, especially population-based search optimization approaches, are critically reviewed in this paper. I will tell you the complete reference for this at the end of this presentation. Okay, so that's it's almost like textbook. In printed version, it is about 55 pages or so. Okay, so you can get more details about all these algorithms and how they are adopted for water resource optimization as well as hydrologic modeling. Now, another way of looking at, especially in the context of this last portion, meta-heuristic approaches, okay, we can try to look at it in a different fashion also, that within meta-heuristics, we talk about population-based, where we have naturally inspired approaches, which are basically under the category of evolutionary algorithms, okay, like genetic algorithms, genetic programming, evolutionary programming, differential evolution, etc. Then we can talk about evolution strategy. We can also talk about scatter search, which can also be put under the evolution algorithm. Then we have within this evaluation, we can talk about implicit as well as explicit, and then we can talk about particle swarm optimization, ant colony optimization, and many other algorithms that I mentioned. Then estimation of a distribution algorithm, which are actually kind of an explicit approach. Then direct, I mentioned about simulated annealing. Then we can talk about iterated local search versus stochastic local search and guided local search. So these are different ways in which we try to improve our search capabilities in a global as well as local domain. Okay, so that's one more way of looking at how these different algorithms have come into picture. Now let's go specific to our topic today, that is genetic algorithm. And for 1 minute or for a couple of minutes, I talk as if I'm a biologist, which I am not. Okay, if you talk about evolution as is proposed by Darwin, okay, it was like the life has started on Earth only over water body, okay, because most of the Earth is covered with water body. Okay, so we had creatures which could survive only in water, and then slowly we had started having creatures which are like amphibians, which can survive both in water as well as on the land, and then some creatures which could survive only on the land, and from there the human has evolved, and from here where we are going. Okay, so the idea of Darwin in proposing this theory of evolution is on a simple principle. It's a profounding statement. He says that survival of the fittest. So whichever the creature or whichever the feature of that creature which is fit will survive for long, and which is not required or which is of less use as we progress, okay, it will slowly vanish. One good example could be the tail that monkey had and human is not having. Okay, and four-legged animal, slowly it became two-legged animal, and things that are required, they have become much larger in size, especially the fingers and other things. Okay, and that's the way things have evolved, and that's the concept that we try to utilize to talk about evolution and mimic it on computer systems through some algorithms. So as I said, it's basically inspired by natural evolution. Living things evolved into more successful organisms offsprings exhibit some traits of each parent. That's what we always say when we see a kid. Oh, he resembles more like his father, or he's tall like his mother. Something like that we can try to attribute to the parent. But doesn't mean that is a photocopy. There are some variations as well. Now, the hereditary traits are determined by genes, and genetic instructions are contained in what we call as chromosomes. Chromosomes are nothing but strands of DNA, and DNA is basically the genetic instructions contained portion. So DNA is composed of base pairs when in meaningful combinations encode hereditary traits, in the sense that if we try to take two chromosomes from each parent, one chromosome each, and then we try to combine them, and we produce an offspring, then it may have some hereditary traits encoded in that DNA. So that's the point that we would like to utilize to talk about evolution. So in that context, we try to use 2 or 3 interesting mechanisms for evolutionary change. You remember, if there is no change, all human beings would look alike, or all creatures would look alike, but there is a change. Why that change is taking place? Because of evolution. And what is causing that? One or two aspects that I can mention here. One is crossover. This is random exchange of parents' chromosomes during reproduction, resulting in offspring having some traits of each parent. Because it's a random exchange, depending on at what portion of each chromosome was exchanged, okay, we may have different traits or different offsprings for the same parents. Okay, so that's one interesting aspect which is called as crossover. So crossover basically demands or requires genetic diversity. If there is a large diversity among the parents, then it will ensure sufficient varied offspring. Otherwise, we also talk about, if the lack of genetic diversity, especially, in India and many other places also it happens, if closely related people were married to each other, then there's a possibility that the genetic diversity is lacking. And because of that, there may be some defects in the offspring due to evolutionary change. So we'll talk about that briefly. Then other one is what is called as mutation. Mutation is another interesting evolutionary mechanism where a rare occurrence of errors during the process of copying chromosomes, which may result in 3 possibilities. That means there is an error, and that error may cause in 3 different possibilities. May happen 3 different possibilities. One, changes that are nonsensical are deadly, producing organisms that can't survive. The offspring may not be able to survive, or that offspring may be physically or mentally challenged because of the mutation. Other one is that changes are beneficial, producing much stronger organisms. Sometimes we say that this kid is taller than both his parents. Okay, this is a result of a mutation, but that mutation is actually producing much stronger organism. Okay, and changes that aren't harmful, deadly, but aren't beneficial, producing organisms that aren't improved. That means although there is a mutation, there is no big change. So these 3 possibilities can happen through mutation. All these 3 are very important in evolutionary mechanism. So we try to use mutation as one more interesting mechanism apart from crossover. Then the third one, which is actually again for evolutionary change, is that how that mating is happening, natural selection. In a competitive environment, the fittest survive. This is where the Darwin's principle comes into picture, resulting in better organisms. So individuals with better survival traits generally survive for a longer period. This provides a better chance for reproducing and passing the successful traits on to the offspring. Over many generations, the species improve since better traits will outnumber weaker ones. The stronger ones will try to be in large number, and the weaker ones will slowly vanish. Okay, and that is the survival of the fittest, Darwin's principle. So we try to use that principle by different mechanisms, or we try to emulate that principle an algorithm through one or two different mechanisms. So basically, these are three mechanisms that we are going to use: crossover, mutation, and natural selection. Now, how do we approach now? That means now I finished my biology expertise. So now let us talk about algorithm portion. So what we'll do now is what we try to do with the genetic approach is to keep a population of individuals that are complete or partial solutions to the given problem. Okay. Now explore solution space by having these individuals interact and compete. There are two interesting statements that I'm making here. Interact and compete. Interaction produces new individuals. Competition eliminates weak individuals. Weak individuals in the sense that that solution may be suboptimal. Okay, so a suboptimal solution will be a weak solution when compared to a better solution. Therefore, such weak solutions would be eliminated due to competition. So interaction and competition, this is what is done through genetic approach. So after multiple generations, a strong individual, that is basically the solution for the given problem, should be found. And that's what we aim to do it in a few generations. And one more interesting aspect that I must mention to you, which we'll also see it again and again, is that in genetic evolution or human evolution, if you look at what happens is from one generation to other generation, population size substantially increases, or actually exponentially increases. And that's what is happening, and we are trying our best to control human population now, right? Whereas in genetic algorithm, because it is a controlled environment, what we try to do is that from one generation to the next generation, we try to maintain exactly same number of members in the population. So if you started in the first generation with 20 members, by the time you come to the next generation, some members will vanish, new members will come in, but the total numbers, the total amount of members in the population would be exactly same as the 20 that we have started with. So from one generation to the next generation, unlike human evolution, population will not increase. Population size will be remaining constant. That's the most popular genetic algorithm. So some of the terminology that we are going to use in genetic algorithms are like population, a set of possible solutions to a problem, or we can call them in terms of evolution like parents. Okay. Then we talk about allotism or allytism, okay, where we talk about allowing the best members to pass to the next generation without any genetic mechanism or evolution. Straight away pass on a few allied members, that is the best members in the current generation. They may not be the best solutions, but in the current population or in the current generation, they are giving the best solution, and those members would be forwarded as it is to the next generation. We'll talk about that. Then mutation, so changing a single member of the population. See, this is a difference between a crossover and mutation. In mutation, we take one member and perform mutation on that. Whereas in crossover, we take two members, combine them to produce a new offspring. Okay, so one possibility is that combine two members to produce an offspring, and on that offspring perform the mutation. Okay, so that's one way of talking about this two functions or two mechanisms, crossover and mutation. And allytism, and also the way we are selecting the members of the population, okay, for mating, is based on that, or based on the principle of survival of the fittest. Section, how to determine which members of the population will survive to the next generation. So I'll try to talk about one or two approaches which are in vogue. Then fitness function, how to evaluate the quality of a member of the population. So once we have an offspring, we want to estimate its contribution or its value for our fitness. Fitness could be simply your objective function. So if you are maximizing something, okay, what is the value of that objective function for when you substitute the value of this offspring? Is it better? Better means it will survive. It is inferior, then it will slowly vanish. Okay, so the fitness function will decide the rank of that individual member of that population. And we can talk about different encoding schemes. The one that I'll be using in today's presentation is binary representation for a member of the population. It's almost like DNA, but it is in that form that we try to represent in a binary form. We can talk about real coded GA afterwards, but at this stage I'll be talking about binary coded GA. So now we talk about the algorithm. So genetic algorithms are basically a nonlinear optimization tool based on combinatorial optimization methods. That means even if you consider, let's say you have only two decision variables, X and Y. Now for various possible combinations of X and Y that can be taken, what is the corresponding objective function value, which is a nonlinear function? And among them, which combination of X and Y is giving the best value for our nonlinear objective function? And that's our global best solution. Okay, so our objective is to reach there. For example, let us say that X has a range of 0 to 10 and Y has a range of 15 to 30. So then what we'll try to do is that we try to vary X between 0 to 10 and Y vary it between 15 to 30. One combination could be X is 7 and Y is 20. For that combination, when you substitute in the objective function value, what is its value? And again, try another combination, like let us say X is 6 and Y is 22. Try what is the solution, which is better. The better one will be having higher fitness and the weaker one will be having lower fitness. Okay, every member will have some fitness, but that fitness will be depending on what is the objective function value that we are reaching, and whether we are maximizing, minimizing, that also can be considered. So these genetic algorithms differ from traditional optimization methods I have told you, like linear programming, dynamic programming, etc. They work with coding of parameter sets and not with parameters themselves. That's a major plus point. And uses objective function alone will not depend on continuity and derivatives or other information. Example, if you are talking about linear programming, objective function has to be linear function, and that requirement is not there. In the same way, if you talk about Lagrangian approach for solving a nonlinear objective function, then that objective function must be differentiable. It is a continuous function, and you should be able to find its first derivative. You should also be able to find second derivative. If it is a discontinuous function, or the function is so complicated that you cannot find its derivative, then it will fail. So Lagrangian approach will not be able to solve it. Whereas GA can solve such problems with equal ease. Now, when I talk about the working principle of GA, first of all, we talk about coding. That's basically binary coding I'll discuss. Then fitness evaluation and the genetic operations, which are reproduction, that is basically based on the selection, then crossover and mutation. So these are the three genetic operations that we perform on every member of the population to generate or to produce the next generation of population. And finally, what should be the termination criteria? Coding, decision variables are coded into binary string called chromosome. Okay, so length of chromosome depends on the desired accuracy. For example, let us say that we have two variables X and Y again. Okay, and if we try to say that X has to change range between 0 to 10 and Y has range between 15 to 30, then we know that Y has a larger range when compared to X. So ideally speaking, the subchromosome length for Y should be slightly larger than that for X. And total length will be the total length of both the subchromosomes together, that is for X and Y. So for example, if we decide that for a given desired accuracy, X can be represented in about 8 bits and Y can be represented in about 10 bits. So total chromosome length will be 18 bits. Okay, and please, I think you are catching there are 2 points here. Each variable chromosome length need not be same. It depends on the range and accuracy of that variable. Okay, so that's why for X we had 8 or 8, and for Y we had 10. So total is 18 bits. Okay, 8 bits. What is the largest number that you can represent in 8 bits? It is 2 power 8, 256, right? So that's the way you can talk about. And 256, but you have only 0 to 10, right? So that 0 to 10, if you divide it into 256 different levels, you can talk about what is the accuracy that we are talking about. Okay, it's something like 10 by 256, and that is the decimal accuracy we can represent with 8 bits. If you want to have more accuracy, make it 10 bits, make it 12 bits, make it 15 bits, and so on. So length of chromosome depends on the desired accuracy. I will again illustrate this with some simple examples. All decision variables need not have equal substring length. That's what I mentioned already. Now you talk about this. This is a population. You have some chromosomes. Say we have 5 chromosomes here, and one chromosome. Actually, all chromosomes should be of equal length. So one chromosome, if you can see, it has about 3 plus 3, 6, 9, and 11 bits. Okay, so there are 12 bits or something like that. Okay, so that's the total length of the chromosome, and within this length, okay, a few bits may represent one variable. Another few bits may represent another variable. A few bits may represent another variable. So you can represent 3 variables, you can represent 2 variables, or you may represent only one variable if in your objective function there is only one variable. Okay, so if you talk about, let us say, a chromosome which is having about 12 bits like this, and in these 12 bits, each 4 bits are indicating one variable. Okay, so this is one variable, second variable, and third variable. Now 1011 is a binary number. 1011, if we try to decode to decimal system, it is nothing but 1 into 2 power 0 plus 1 into 2 power 1 plus 0 into 2 power 2 plus 1 into 2 power 3. Okay, that's, I mean, this is something that is being taught to children nowadays in 7th standard. How do you convert binary system to decimal system and decimal system to binary system? So if you add them up, you get it as 11. So this represents in decimal system 11, and this in binary system represents 6 in decimal system, and 1001 represents 9. So in this chromosome of about 12 bits, okay, we have 3 variables, and depending on what is the value of each bit can be 0 or 1. It's a binary, 0 or 1, that's all. Okay, so based on how these 4 bits are represented, we have its corresponding variable value. So it may be representing X, this may be representing Y, this may be representing Z. Okay, all these 3 variables are functions of your objective function. Our objective function is basically a function of these 3 variables. So that is binary encoding. For example, now if you try to make this as 1 and this as 0, so this variable will take some other value in the same way, and this, if they retain the same, then what happens, only this variable is changed, but other 2 variables are retained same. But that is another combination that we can try. So many number of combinations can be tried for all these 3 variables. Among them, one particular combination gives the best value for your objective function. So our genetic algorithm will try to identify that best solution in multiple generations. Initialization, seeding the population. What we have to do is initialize sets the beginning population of individuals from which future generations are produced. What are the important aspects here? First of all, what should be the size of the initial population? That has to be decided a priori. It can be 20, it can be 30, it can be 50, depending on the problem size, we can try to decide. Okay. Once that is decided, then that will remain the same from one generation to the next generation. So it can be decided experimentally or based on some heuristics to decide what should be the size of the population. And then to ensure diversity of the initial population, okay, which we call as genetic diversity. I have also explained the reason for it. Okay, a common issue in resulting from the lack of diversity is premature convergence or non-optimal solution, which we call in optimization problems as local optima. Okay, so you may reach the local optima, but from there you may not be able to go to the global optima, and that may happen because of lack of genetic diversity of the initial population. Or it may finally reach the global optimum, but it may take more number of generations than what were otherwise required because of lack of diversity. Okay, so we try to ensure diversity, and there are many ways in which we can do. I'll explain one or two. Then when I talk about fitness evaluation, basically it is objective function value. So evaluation ranks the individuals by some fitness measure that corresponds with the quality of the individual solutions derived from the objective function. Okay, so you take that object, take the chromosome, decode it to variable values, substitute them in the objective function, find out its fitness value. Okay, so all resting variables will be coded to one string, which is called chromosome, which I already explained. Okay, so many objective functions can be there. One could be classification. If you're trying to classify an image, then we can try to talk about how many pixels are correctly classified. Our traveling salesman problem, which is a very popular NP-hard problem. Okay, the distance that the traveling salesman has to travel needs to be minimized. Okay, so that could be again a genetic algorithm. Then satisfaction or number of terms that are satisfied. Walking animation, if you talk about producing animated movies like Tom and Jerry or something like that. Okay, and that is a subjective rating and how we can try to optimize it. So there could be different types of optimization functions. Okay, and the main problem in all these things is often fitness functions have local minima. We want to overcome that problem. I'll explain that also when I illustrate. So in a GA operating cycle, what we are doing is we are starting with a population. Okay, we start with a population, and within that population, we try to select some members, call them as elite members, and those elite members will simply go to the next generation without any modification. Okay, and we also select two members and produce a population or offspring by crossover. And after crossover, when the offspring is produced, on that offspring we perform mutation, and that mutated offspring is considered as the member of the population. So all these mechanisms will eventually result in the population size being same from one generation to another generation. So some members may be elite members for the next generation, and some members may be based on the crossover, and some members may be based on the crossover and mutation. But the total number of members in the population would be same as what we have started in the first generation. So we continue this operation until we reach our termination criteria. I'll talk about termination criteria then. Now, before I talk about that, let me talk about selection techniques. There are many ways in which we can talk about selection techniques. That means if you have a few members in the population, say 20 members, of those 20 members, which are the two members that are to be selected for mating to produce or to do crossover and produce an offspring. Okay. And to do that, what we try to do, one of the popular approaches is called proportional fitness selection. So what we try to do is, let us say that we have 5 members in the population, only 5, A, B, C, D, E. Okay, sorry. And for A, its fitness value, that is the objective function value, which we are trying to maximize, is let us say 5. And B is 20. And C, it is resulting in 11. And D is resulting in 8. E is resulting in 6. Okay, so for each member, we also know its fitness value, which is nothing but the objective function value. Okay, so what we can do, simply add them up. If you add them up, okay, and then take this 5 and divide by the total. 20 divided by the total. Okay, 11 divided by the total. Then we talk about what is fitness probability. Okay, because it is very close at a very high objective function value, which we are maximizing. Okay, B will have the highest fitness, 40%, and C will have 11. That means 22%. Okay, if you try to add them up, you'll get around 50. So it will try to what is the value? Okay, 31, 36, 44, 50. Right. So that way you can try to talk about the probabilities. Okay, that is also explained here. Fitness by 50. So that's the probability. Now, as you can notice, each member is not having the same fitness probability. So if you look at in the current generation of 5 members, B has the highest fitness of 40%. Therefore, we can consider that as a light member of the current generation. It may be retained as it is to the next generation. Okay. And while we are selecting the other 2 members for mating, what we try to do is that we try to give more probability to B to be selected when compared to E or A. Okay, 10% and 12%. So this is done in a very simple game. In case, I don't expect, but in case if you have been to casinos, you would have seen this kind of roulette wheel gambling. Okay, you bet on one number, and if that number wheel stops at that number, then you get some returns, is it not? Some lot of money and things of that kind. But this is a cheating kind of a roulette wheel, where each sector of the wheel is not same. Okay, and it is different. For example, 3 has a large sector, whereas 2 has a very small portion. That happens because of these 8 members of the population. Okay, 1 has a higher fitness value, 3 has a higher fitness value, whereas 2 has a lower fitness value. Okay, depending on that probability. Okay, total is always 100%. Therefore, we divide this wheel or circle into different segments with respect to its fitness value of the current generation. Okay, then you rotate this wheel and see where it stops. Okay, and that member is the first member that is selected for crossover. Then rotate again, second member will come. Okay, and those are the 2 members that are selected for mutation, offspring, producing offspring through crossover. Okay, so for example, if we rotate this wheel like this 1, 5, 2, what is interesting is that even though 2 has a small segment, even that is picked up a couple of times. Okay, so every member will have some probability to be picked up, but the stronger member will have higher rate of survival into the next generation. That's the importance, and that's how we try to emulate Darwin's principle through this cheating kind of roulette wheel simulation. So that's one possibility. That's one most popular way of selecting members. Okay. Then to avoid crowding, we try to use various approaches. Crowding means, to ensure genetic diversity. A potential problem associated with selection occurs when the individuals that are most fit quickly reproduce so that a large percentage of the entire population looks very similar, which is not good. So reduces diversity in the population may hinder the long run progress of the algorithm. So that can be overcome to a great extent by doing better mechanisms of crossover as well as mutation. Okay, so when you talk about crossover, basically we try to represent in a vector form. I'll explain that with example. Okay, one important aspect is crossover rate, number of crossover points, and positions of the crossover points. I'll explain all that with a simple, very simple concept, which is called a single point crossover, cut and splice mechanism. The other one is mutation. This is single point crossover that I mentioned to you. Yeah, let me explain this. Single point crossover or one point crossover. What we try to do is take a chromosome. Okay, let us say that this is one member of the population and this is another member of the population. So these are 2 chromosomes. Okay, now what we decide that first of all we have to decide that these are the 2 members that we are going to mate. That is decided based on our natural selection, roulette wheel simulation. Okay, so let's say that these are the 2 members that are selected from the population. The next one is that we have decided to go for single point crossover. That means only at one point crossover will take place. Okay. Now, first thing is we toss a coin and try to find out at which position we perform that crossover. How many digits are there here? 10 digits are there. Okay. So in 10 boxes, at which position we should start the crossover. So let's say it tosses the coin between 0 to 10 and says that fourth digit. That means after the fourth digit, whatever is there, that should be swapped. Random exchange is taking place after the fourth digit. So you see, this is a portion that is there after the fourth digit, and this is a portion that is there after the fourth digit for each of these parent strings. Okay, so this green portion comes here and the yellow portion goes here. Okay, so these are the two offsprings produced. Okay, this is one offspring and this is another offspring. Compare this with the two parents. They're completely different. Only this portion is common, but this portion is completely different. So that might result in a different combination than the combination that we have considered here, or the combination that we have considered here. So that's how single point crossover works. Single point crossover can solve most of the nonlinear optimization problems, but if they are very NP hard or very highly nonlinear, then we can also think of going for multiple point crossover. But I will illustrate single point crossover. The other one is that mutation. Mutation, what happens is after you produce an offspring, within that offspring, randomly decide at which location you want to do the mutation. For example, let us say this is the location, that red pink point. This is the digit at which we want to do the mutation. Then what we will do in that bit, whatever the value that is there, we'll swap it. If it is 1, we'll make it 0. If it is 0, we'll make it 1. Only that bit. Okay. And when you change this bit, that chromosome is modified. And this may result in change in this variable value if that variable is represented up to these bits, or if the variable is represented up to these bits. Okay. Depending on how many bits are used to represent one of the variables, okay, it may have different effect due to the mutation. For example, it's only 3-bit variable. This is the most important bit. It will change substantially. Whereas it is a 5-bit. This is a middle bit. So it will slightly change the variable value. And if this is the last bit of the variable, okay, then what happens is that it has the least effect in modifying, because it will only change by one small value. Okay, so that mutation randomly done will allow us to modify a given variable within its local region or far away from it. Okay, that's the advantage of mutation. So bitwise mutation is performed bit by bit by flipping a coin with a very low probability of mutation. It will just basically create a point in the neighborhood of the current point for local search or maintain diversity in the population. Okay, so again the question is how many times you want to perform mutation on a given offspring. Is it 1, twice, or none? None means there is no mutation as far as that offspring is concerned. Okay, so and then how many times you want to do. So that can be done again through random approach. So this is what happens if you have a chromosome and at 2 locations if you have modified. Okay, at these 2 locations if you have modified through mutation, okay, this would result in opposite and this would result in its opposite. 0 would become 1 and 1 would become 0. In a summary, genetic algorithm operations, if you look at, we have a population initially in the current generation, and of them we try to find out the fitness value for each chromosome or each member and rank them. That means the first one has the highest fitness, second one has the second highest fitness, and the last one has the least fitness. That's the way you rank them. Okay, and among them, that means the first few are elite members because they have a higher fitness value. So those elite members, for example, if we decide that the elite members that you are going to use is 3, that is also again we can decide a priori. Okay, so if 3 members are considered as elite members, the first 3 members will be copied as it is into the next generation. Okay, then what we'll do, again take all these members, we take any few, including elect members, please remember, okay? Including all these members, we take any 2 members, that is through selection, Rowlett wheel simulation that I explained, then perform crossover, perform mutation, and produce the offsprings. Okay, you try to produce as many offsprings as required to fill in all this gap. Because if you have started with 30 members, okay, 3 are already copied, so you have to produce 27. So produce this 27 through this operation. Okay, so the next generation will be having 30 members. That will come here for the current generation. Again, evaluate the fitness value, rank them, and talk about elite members, selection, crossover, mutation, and keep doing it. So this, what I have shown in flowchart here, is for one generation. Like that, we do it for multiple generations. Okay. Now, these 3 operators are simple and straightforward. Reproduction operator selects good strings. Crossover operator recombines good substrings from good strings together to hopefully create a better substring. Mutation operator alters a string locally to hopefully create a better string. See please this yellow highlighted word, hopefully. While we are doing this, we're only hoping that a better substring will be created, but it may be weaker substring. If it is a weaker substring, its fitness value will be low, therefore its probability of survival is low, therefore it will not be continuing for a few longer generations. Whereas if the fitness value is better, then it will continue to be a elite member, or it will replace one of the elite members, and therefore it will continue for the next generation with a higher probability. So although none of these claims are generated, are guaranteed, and are tested while creating a string, it is expected that if bad strings are created, they will be eliminated by the reproduction operator in the next generation. Now, if we talk about genetic algorithm as a pseudocode, okay, what we do, we begin, define the problem dimension, okay, that is how many number of variables are there. Based on that, talk about the chromosome length based on the desired accuracy, okay. Generate initial population, call this as P0 of size NP, say 20, 30, 50, whatever it is. Then evaluate the fitness of all these NP individuals in the P0 population. Initialize generation counter T to 0. The while termination criterion is not satisfied, I did not talk about termination criterion so far, I will talk about it. Okay. Then selection of parents on the basis of their fitness. Create offsprings for the next generation, that is PT plus 1, from the parents using crossover operation. And perform mutation on the new generation of these offsprings. Okay. Evaluate the fitness of each of the members of the population in PT plus 1, that is next generation. Okay, set T to T plus 1, and this loop will terminate after the termination criterion is met. So if we talk about termination criteria, there are 2 possible termination criteria. One is that the best value that you have got for the objective function in the current generation has not changed in the next generation. Means still it is the best value. And if it happens for 1 or 2 generations, that means you have already reached the global optimum. So you can stop. Other termination criteria is that stop after a few number of generations. Say fix it as 20 or fix it as 50. After 50 generations, you stop. What is the final solution that you got? Call that as your best solution. So termination criteria could be lack of improvement in the objective function from 1 generation to the next, or prefixed number of generations for the algorithm. These 2 could be termination criteria. Now let me illustrate that with very simple classroom kind of examples. Okay, this is very popular mathematical problem. It is called Himmelblue function. Okay, and this function we are asked to find out what is the minimum of the function, not maximum, but minimum. It's function of 2 variables, x1 and x2. Okay, as you can see, it's a quadratic nonlinear equation. Okay, now what we are trying to do is, we are also specified the range for x1 and x2. x1 and x2 will be in the range of 0 to 6. So both have the same range. Okay, and the solution is actually when you try to minimize this function for some combination of x1 and x2, you should get f of x1, x2 as 0. That is the solution. Okay, and the true solution is when x1 equal to 3 and x2 equal to 2. If you substitute them here, you'll get it as 0. Okay, so that we are now trying to solve it using genetic algorithm. And we try to find, based on the accuracy that we have set, the function is minimum at a point x1 equal to 2.997 and x2 equal to 2.029, and the value is 0.013, which is close to 0, and this solution is also very close to these actual values. Not exactly same, but very close. Okay, and if you want to make it much closer, you have to improve the accuracy, increase the chromosome length. So let us try to solve this problem using GA. Okay, so number of objective functions is 1, objective function type is minimize, crossover is a binary GA, single point crossover. Okay, population size is 20, number of generations are fixed as 30, crossover probability, which is generally high, 0.8, and mutation probability, which should generally be very low, is 0.95. And these random numbers that we are generating on computer system are called pseudo random numbers, and to generate them, the seed that was used is 0.76, and string length is 20. 20 is the string length, 20 bits. Okay, in that first 10 bits will be for x1 and next 10 bits for x2, because both have the same range and we expect them to have same accuracy requirement. Please note, even if there are two variables with the same range, if your desired accuracy is different for each of the variables, then the substring length can be different. And the number of variables are 2. Okay, so that's how it is done, and a lower limit and upper limit is given, which is very useful for us to decide the string length and its accuracy. So if we are talking about 10 bits for one variable in the range of 0 to 6, what is the accuracy that we are getting? That we can try to check. Okay, with 10 bits, we can get a solution accuracy of, the original range is 6 minus 0. And the number of values that you can represent in 10 bits is 2 power 10 minus 1. So 6 minus 0 by 2 power 10 minus 1 or 0.006 is the accuracy. In the sense that we can start with a combination of 0, 0.006, 0.012, 0.018, etc. up to 6 within this 10 bits. That many number of combinations we can try for x1. In the same way, that many number of combinations we can try for x2. So if we decide the number of bits, we are deciding the accuracy. And if this accuracy is not sufficient for you, then make it larger number, 12 bits or 15 bits. Then you can try to have much better accuracy. Okay. Then step 2 is evaluate each string in the population. For example, there is one substring, let us say like this. Okay, this is 10 bits. That is x1 value. Okay, and this x1 subchromosome can be decoded to a value like, this is 2 power 9 and this is 0, then 2 power 7, 2 power 4 because others are zeros. Okay, and then 2 power 0. So add them up, it is 657. What does the 657 mean? 657 is not there in the range of 0 to 6. Okay, but actually we have to decode it. Corresponding parameter value is 0 plus 6 minus 0 into 657 by 2 power 10 minus 1, which is 1023. So 3.853. So x1 value we are using is 3.853 for this substring. Like that, take the next substring and decode it, get the x2 value. And substitute the x1, x2 values in your objective function. Okay, you get the fitness value. Get that fitness value. And generally we try to maximize, because this is the objective function minimization type, we can take the inverse of it. Okay, so that is what is done. We try to take the inverse of it to talk about minimization versus maximization. Okay, then you can see that there are 20 members of the population. Okay, so these are the 20 members of the current generation. In that, I'm trying to give a small gap here of the 20 bits. Okay, These first 10 bits are for one variable and second 10 bits are for second variable. Like that, we are trying to see the 20 bits like that, 20 members. Okay. Then if you try to look at one combination that we want to perform as far as crossover is concerned, okay, you take the first member and check whether it is a candidate for crossover or not. If it says yes, then pick up the next member, which is also a candidate for crossover. That means these are the two members which are to be selected for mating through our roulette wheel simulation. Once that is done, then the next thing is what is the position at which you want to perform the crossover. Say 9th position. So after 9, whatever is there in under red line, okay, and whatever is there in this blue line here, these two are to be swapped. So the new member corresponding to this crossover will be this and this. Okay, so these two strings have now changed as these two strings for the next generation. We still call this as intermediate population because after that, after the crossover, we decide whether to perform mutation or not. So this offspring we take, and let us say that we decide to perform mutation here. Okay, so it was actually 0, it has now become 1. Okay, so only one bit we have mutated of these 20 bits. Okay, and the same way you can notice at some places there is no mutation at all. So crossover offspring is as it is retained. Okay, and there is no crossover at all. That means that member is retained as it is to the next generation. So every possibility is there based on this generation. So, but what is finally happening from this mating pool? We produce this next generation, and that generation can be decoded. These bits like the way I have explained here. Okay, we can decode this into one value of x1. Same thing is done here. This is the value of x1 and this is the value of x2. Substitute them in the objective function, you get this. Okay, invert it using this expression. Okay, you get the value like this. Okay, so this is the thing that has to be maximized. Okay, or this has to be minimized. Okay, so we try to do that and try to identify based on this fitness value. We rank these members and call it as the next mating pool. Okay, so in all the three genetic operations, that is selection, crossover, and mutation, three important genetic operations are illustrated here with this example. Okay, so we got the new generation. Find out its fitness, rank them, order them in that way, ascending order, basically ascending order. Okay, and call that as a new generation. Continue like this. Okay, and continue like this until our termination criterion is met. So once that is done, what is happening. You can see it in the solution domain. This x1 has a range of 0 to 6 and x2 also has a range of 0 to 6. Okay, so you can see this after crossover. Okay, the member is here, and after mutation it has moved to here. Okay, x1 value is, let us say, somewhere around 3. It has now become 2.1 or something like that. Okay, and here also x1, we are doing single point mutation mostly. So what's happening is only one of the variables will be affected. Therefore, it will move along the x-axis or along the y-axis depending on where we have done the mutation. Whether we have done in the first 10 bits or the next 10 bits based on that. And you see here, this mutation has resulted in such a large variation for x1. Whereas here this mutation has resulted in a very small variation for x1. Okay, and here there is no change at all. Okay, like that, mutation will try to make all three possibilities nonsensical, stronger, or no big change. Okay, so that's how we try to produce the population after mutation. So you combine this, this is the way we got offsprings after first generation. Okay, and by the time we come to about 30th generation, these are the offsprings. And if you look at the fitness value also, we can notice that the best or the worst value, that is because we are minimizing, okay, is obtained somewhere here. Okay, and that corresponding value 0.01 actually. Okay, the corresponding combination can be specified. In this way, if you try to look at some of the combinations which are giving, once you put them in the ascending order, you can automatically know which is the best member, and that member will be considered as the solution because we had decided to stop the genetic algorithms after 30th generation. Okay, therefore, whatever solution that we got, we try to project that as the best solution. So that's how we can try to solve this problem. Now this I have demonstrated or illustrated with all binary operations, bit by bit, crossover, mutation, etc. Okay, so now I'll try to show you the final solution. You see, the solution is here. The best value, best combination of x1 and x2. If you recall, x1 should be 3 and x2 should be 2, right? So by the time we reach 30th generation, if you look at each of the members of the population, okay, many members are very close to the best solution, but a few are still away from the solution. So if you had carried on, let's say, another 2 or 3 generations, maybe you would have hit more number of points closer to this portion. That's a very important point that I want you to appreciate. What we are doing is we are not only talking about the best solution, but we are also finding many solutions which are close to the best solution. Okay, that's an advantage of genetic algorithms or with any evolutionary or population sets based algorithm. That's a very big advantage when we talk about multi-objective optimization problem. Okay, so please keep that in mind. We are not only producing the best solution, but we are also producing many solutions which are very close to the best solution. Okay. Now you can see how the initial population was spread randomly around the possible range of x1 and x2. But by the time it is 30th generation, we have converged onto the optimal solution. Now, these are the fitness values and other parameters that are specified, number of mutations performed after each generation, and how we reach the best solution. Now, another problem that I want to demonstrate, which is more complicated when compared to the first one, it is called peaks function math, okay, because it has multiple peaks. If it has multiple peaks, only one of the peaks is the best, and you may be stuck in the local optima. How do you overcome that? You can see this function, which is highly nonlinear. Okay, it's a function of 2 variables x and y only, but the function is highly nonlinear. Okay, and if you try to plot this function for various values of x and y, okay, with function value z shown in a 3rd dimension, okay, you try to see it like this. There are multiple peaks and multiple valleys. Valleys are the lower points of the function, and peaks are the high points of the function. So our objective through this search for this entire domain is to converge onto this peak. We are maximizing this function. Okay, we are maximizing this function. Okay, so our objective is to reach here. This is in 3-dimensional. If you try to see the planar view, okay, these are the contours, and the best solution is here. Okay, now when we start the genetic algorithm with initial population, the members are there all around. This each circle here, blue circle, is one member. Okay, so the members are there all around in the entire search space. Okay, and by the time we come to 5th generation, okay, some of them are at the local peak and some of them are at the global peak. Okay, but by the time we reach 10th generation, all the members are converged onto this global peak. Trust me, the number of members here, as well as here is exactly same, but they're all at one place here. Okay, and that is at the global best. So that's the way GA process will try to converge onto the global optimal solution in a real, in a reasonable space and time. Okay, same thing if you have tried to look at all combinations of those 2 variables x and y. It would have taken a hell of a lot of time on the computational system to get at this optimal solution. Because of this genetic evolutionary process or genetic algorithm with 3 operators, selection, crossover, and mutation are making this reach the global optimum with very few number of trials. Now, so far what I discussed is you have a function you are trying to maximize or minimize. But let us say that function is also subject to some constraints, which is the real world optimization problem. Okay. So if it is subject to constraints, what we try to do is that when we look up any particular combination, while we are checking the objective function value, we will also check whether that combination is satisfying the constraint or not. If it is not satisfying, although it may be a good solution, it is not good solution because it is not satisfying a constraint. Therefore, we have to penalize it. So we try to put some penalty function for violation of the constraints. So this is approach for constraint optimization is called as penalty bracket operator approach. Okay, and that will try to optimize a function even if it is subject to constraints. Okay, so basically the same function that you have, but then you have a bunch of constraints. Okay, and for each of the constraints, we try to check its violation. Okay, and that violation, it can be negative or positive. So to overcome that, is square it. Okay, so it will always be positive, and that violation is multiplied by a penalty. Okay, this penalty, we can also talk about this penalty being if you are trying to maximize. Okay, the penalty is negative. That means it's reducing the objective function value. Okay, because of violation of the constraint. So it will not be a good member to survive. Its fitness value will be low. Okay, whereas if you are minimizing, you try to make this as +1. Okay, it tries to add a lot more to the objective function value, which is not resulting in minimum value. Therefore, it will not survive for the next few generations. Okay, so this penalty bracket operator approach will be, what we are saying here in the sigma summation is for the number of constraints. K is the total number of constraints that we may have. And the advantage is, if you want, we can talk about this penalty coefficient. Means for each constraint, we don't have to specify the same amount of penalty. For some constraints, specify more penalties. For some constraints, specify less penalty. But the total is what you are trying to multiply with +1 or -1. So that's a very interesting concept that can be used for constrained optimization of a nonlinear objective function using genetic algorithms. It is almost, an analogy. If you try to look at graphical analogy, let us take the same function, Himmelblue function, okay, which had x1 and x2, okay, but now it has one constraint, okay, x1 minus 5 whole square plus x2 square minus 26 should be greater than or equal to 0. Only those values of x1 and x2 which will satisfy this constraint should be considered. Other combinations of x1 and x2 should not be considered. And in addition, we have these 4 constraints which are there earlier also, based on which we have decided the range for each binary string. Okay, so if you try to talk about this constraint, and in the previous example that I mentioned, if you try to plot this constraint will plot like this, indicating, okay, anything that is above, because it says greater than, okay, greater than 0. So anything that is above only will satisfy. Only this portion is now our feasible region. This entire portion, which is within the range of x1 and x2 only, but it is violating this constraint. So this entire thing becomes infeasible. You remember, if there is no constraint, the solution was here, x1 equal to 3 and x2 equal to 2. But that solution now is not feasible because if you substitute x1 equal to 3 and x2 equal to 2 here, it will be less than 0. It is violating this constraint. Okay, so that is not a feasible solution. Now within this region only, we should find the best solution. So use the penalty bracket operator, okay, and again go through the generations. You can see that, when you talk about generation 0, which is indicated in square boxes, okay, they are everywhere in the entire solution domain. Okay, but when you talk about the circle after 30th generation, you don't see even one circle in this region because it is violating the constraint. All the circuits by the time you come to 30th generation are in this side only, and the best solution is here. Okay, and the corresponding value can be obtained. Same concept, everything is same. Only thing is we are now penalizing those combinations of x1 and x2 which are violating one or more constraints. That's all. Okay, that's how we can try to obtain a ZA solution even if it is subject to some constraints. Again, the constraints can be non-linear. They need not be linear. For example, here this constraint is these 4 constraints are linear, whereas this constraint is non-linear. No issues at all. It can be discontinuous in the sense that you accept this constraint for the range of x1 equal to 0 to 3 or 0 to 1. Okay, for other portion I don't mind. If you have that kind of if statements for the constraints, you can still handle them in genetic algorithm. I'll try to talk about that in real world applications. So this is basically, we now started with the GA, we learned GA, we applied it for unconstrained optimization, then we applied for constrained optimization, we applied the solutions. So now let us go to real world problems of reservoir operation. Reservoir operation basically means that you have water in the dam and the reservoir, and you want to decide how much to be utilized for what purpose, say irrigation, hydropower, for drinking water, etc., and how much to be stored so that you can use it for future periods. Okay, that is what we call as optimal reservoir operation. Your objective function could be, let us say that hydropower needs to be maximized. Total hydropower produced needs to be maximized. Our total crop yield that we got from irrigation water release should be maximized. Any such things. Okay, so let us start with a simple objective function, hydropower optimization from a reservoir. That is, maximize the total hydropower produced in a year with other demands on the reservoir as constraints. Other demands could be, how much water you should release for irrigation, how much water you should supply for industry, and how much water you should supply downstream due to riparian rights. Whatever may be the number of constraints you have, impose them. Okay, and if you look at the objective function itself, hydropower is basically function of discharge and the head causing the flow. So it's a nonlinear function. Okay, and that nonlinear function can be easily optimized using GA. So let us try to demonstrate this for a monthly reservoir operation for about 12 months in a 1 year, just to show you how it can be solved. So 12 periods in a year, that means you have 12 decision variables. One decision variable represents the release made for hydropower in that month, like that for 12 months. Okay. So I try to demonstrate this for Hirakud Dam, which is located in Odisha state on Mahanadi River basin. It's a multi-purpose project on Mahanadi River. It has flood control, irrigation, hydropower as the 3 major objectives. As a matter of fact, dam itself is constructed for flood control. Okay, its location, its catchment area, its active storage capacity, installed turbine capacity, irrigated area in Kharif and Rabi are all specified here. It's not in hectares, it's in square kilometers. Okay, so with these numbers, let us try to talk about its operation for 12 months on a monthly basis. Okay, so what is our objective function? Maximize the power produced in all these 12 months. In 1 month it is PT, and T is ranging from 1 to 12. So P1 plus P2 plus etc. up to P12. That is our objective function, which has 12 variables. Okay, and PT itself is a function of what is the release that is made to the turbine and what is the head causing the flow. And 2725 is basically conversion constant. If release is in million meter cube and head is in meters and power is in megawatts. Okay, this will convert all that into corresponding. It will try to use that units to convert it into power in megawatts. Okay, and it tries to use the turbine efficiency and other things are also brought into it. That is our objective function. What are the constraints? Releases for firm power and turbine capacity, in the sense that in every period or every month, we must produce the power that we have guaranteed from the dam, which is called as firm power. Okay, so release for power should be greater than that firm power committed for every month. It may be same, or for every month the power committed may be different. In that case, it will be different values for every month. Okay, that is a lower limit. What is upper limit? Release that is made cannot be more than the turbine capacity. Then turbine will overflow, right? And that will not change from time to time because of physical constant or physical constraint. Okay, so turbine capacity will be one constant value, and that has to be adhered for every month. So what we are trying to hear, this symbol in optimization terminology refers to for all. Okay, so for all t equal to 1 to 12 and for all t equal to 1 to 12. So we have 12 constraints here. We have 12 constraints here, total 24 constraints regarding firm power and turbine capacity. Then we can also talk about irrigation demand constraints. Okay, release for irrigation in any time period should be greater than the minimum required in that time period. Minimum required will be in such a way that crop will not die. So it will be above crop wilting point. Okay, and that would be different for each month depending on its crop growth stage. Okay, so that ID min for each time period has to be specified for all time periods. In some periods we may not have any crop grown in summer, then it may be 0. Okay, and then release that is supplied should be less than the maximum that is required for the crop to grow at its best. Okay, all the water that is required based on your duty delta requirements, if you try to estimate the total water that is required, it should be less than that, less than or equal to that. Okay, for all t. So again, some more constraints. Okay, then what is very important is system dynamics, or reservoir storage continuity equation. Storage at the end of the time period, St plus 1, should be equal to storage at the beginning of the time period plus inflow during the time period minus release for irrigation minus release for power minus overflow, if any, minus evaporation, if any. Okay, so this is continuity equation. Okay, this AT comes into picture mainly to deal with evaporation as a function of reservoir water surface area. Okay, so that basically talks about the continuity equation, and this continuity equation, this is an equality constraint. This is not an inequality constraint. Okay, this is an equality constraint, and this must be satisfied for every month for all 12 months. Okay, and then another one is that storage in any time period should be less than the physical capacity of the reservoir. If the water is stored more, reservoir has to overflow. A dam will be overflowing. Okay, so we should not exceed that. So upper limit is specified capacity. Okay, and that must be maintained for every time period. Okay, now you see the number of constraints are continuously increasing. So if you look at them, how many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 sets of constraints, each for 12 periods. So 72 constraints are there, and 12 variables are there. 12 decision variables are there. Okay, that is the problem size. We started with a 2 variable problem and no constraints, and 2 variable problem, 1 constraint. Now suddenly we are talking about 12 variable problem with the 72 constraints. Okay, so that problem, again we have to talk about identification of decision variables for our genetic algorithm. Okay, that is 12 months. So 12 periods power release. Okay, fixation of upper bound and lower bound. Lower bound is the firm power. Upper bound is the capacity of the turbine, which is constant, whereas lower bound will change. Then fixation of binary string length based on the difference between the upper and lower bound of each decision variable, we can decide the string length of that variable. Coding of the string, binary coding. And decoding of decision variables, linear mapping rule, which I have explained and demonstrated also. Then calculation of fitness, values of additional variables and the effective head are substituted into fitness function to evaluate such fitness, and also talk about the violation. Okay, and violation will be penalized, and therefore we talk about the net fitness. So all the three operators, that is reproduction, crossover, and mutation, are performed on the strings, and crossover probability is fixed as 0.8, whereas mutation probability, as I told you, should be very low. It is 0.006. And repeat until termination criterion is met. Termination criterion is like number of generations, or there is no further increase in the total amount of hydropower produced from one generation to the next generation. Now, if we talk about the lower bound and upper bound for Hirakud Dam, okay, for release for power, lower bound in January is this much, upper bound is always constant, which is turbine capacity in million metric cube. Okay, so because the range is different here and compared to the range here, we try to decide the spring length. So what we did is that for some range, we decided the spring length should be 10, and for a much larger range, we decided the spring length should be 15. Okay, so Jan it is 10 bits, February it is 15 bits, March it is 15 bits. Okay, and again July it is 10 bits, like this. If you add all these bits, the total length of the chromosome will be coming. Okay, that many bits will be the total length of the chromosome. That's one chromosome or one member of the population. And in that member, each bit, whether it is 0 or 1, randomly decided. Based on that, we have large number of members of the population. So, you know, the inflows and the irrigation demands are also specified here, because they also will decide the help in doing the continuity equation and also the upper limits for irrigation demand. Okay. Then we also try to run this model for various inflow scenarios, not only for this average inflows, but if the average inflows are lower by about 20% or by about 40%, that means in a drought year, okay, and average inflows are higher by 20%, like a flood year, okay, in those situations, how the reservoir should be operated for hydropower optimization. Naturally, when you talk about 40% below average flows, the hydropower produced will be very small. Whereas when you talk about 20% above average flows, the hydropower produced will be very high. And that's what can be done through this optimization. So that's what is done. And you can see for each inflow scenario, what is the optimal operating policy, in how much water should be released for hydropower in each month is specified here. This we also call as rule curve. So this rule curve, which is to be followed by the dam operator in Hirakud Dam, could be specified. So if he knows that he is going to get 40% below average inflows, he should use this rule curve. If it is 20% below average, this rule curve. Okay, average flows, this is a rule curve. And a flood year, this is a rule curve. So for every situation, every possible situation, okay, prediction could be based on IMD forecast. Okay, then we can talk about how the reservoir should be operated. See, genetic algorithms is there, crossover, mutation, selection, many things have happened. But finally, for the operator, he will simply specify how much water he should release through the turbine in every month. That's all. All the nonlinear optimization with hundreds of constraints is taken care. Okay, why I'm saying it is hundreds of constraints is, you know, if you take the 6 sets of constraints that you have seen here, okay, and here it is not for, let us say, monthly operation, but it is for daily operation. Then what happens? There will be 365 constraints here and 365 here, like that. 6 into 365 number of constraints and 365 decision variables. Problem size has increased largely, and if that is not sufficient, talk about hourly operation. 6 into 365 into 24 number of constraints will be there. You can use your calculator to know how many number of constraints are there. Okay. We can try to solve large-scale nonlinear optimization problems using genetic algorithms. Okay. I want to talk to you about multi-objective optimization. That's a major advantage when you talk about population search based or population-based search algorithms. Okay. I repeat that small point that I mentioned to you. When you reach the final generation, you not only have the solution at its best, but you have many solutions of that population which are very close to the best. Okay, that's a very important aspect for multi-objective optimization. First of all, try to bring the context of multi-objective optimization. Let us say that in the same reservoir that we are talking about, we want to talk about reservoir operation for hydropower generation, for irrigation, for water quality, for flood risk, all of them being separate objectives. The problem is, if you talk about hydropower generation, okay, you want to utilize the water when the reservoir level is at its maximum. Because for the same discharge, when the head causing flow is high, you get more amount of hydropower. So ideally speaking, for hydropower optimization, you want to have the reservoir at its full level to generate more power. But when you talk about flood risk, what you would like to do, you would like to empty the reservoir so that the incoming flood can be accommodated and downstream area can be protected. Okay, so there is a conflict. Maximization of flood risk will try to minimization of flood risk will try to reduce the storage, whereas maximization of hydropower would like to have more storage in the reservoir. And irrigation deficits for conservation, so you try to conserve that water. So you divert that water, and again it will conflict with hydropower. Water quality, the water that you release downstream into the river for water quality maintenance is lost as far as irrigation is concerned. So again a conflict. So there are conflicting objectives, and we want to find out a compromise solution which will satisfy all the objectives to some extent. That is called multi-objective optimization with the conflicting objectives or goals and each objective being nonlinear. That's what we want to do. So what we call then is the trade-off solution. There's an objective function f1, there is an objective function f2. Okay, so if you want to maximize f1, you may have to reduce f2. Both are to be maximized, okay? But if you want to maximize f2 to a great extent, you may have to reduce f1. So if you look at this solution, okay, f1 is small, but f2 is very high. Whereas if you look at this solution, f2 is very small, but f1 is very high. So f1 is, let us say, hydropower, and f2 is flood risk minimization. Okay, so then we are trying to look at what is the best compromise solution. Okay, literally they are not correct, some compromise solution. Okay, so in the genetic algorithm fashion, we start like this. We try to look at each of the objective functions, and we try to reach a solution which is along this curve, which we call it as Pareto optimal front, okay, or curve. Okay, so on that curve, we try to identify as many number of points, saying that any point here is the best solution. Anything below this, okay, will be suboptimal. Anything above this will be violating the constraints. Okay, so in multi-objective evolutionary algorithms, there are three additional points that are generally considered. How to guide the population towards the Pareto set, that is convergence, fitness assignment based on that. Okay, and how to maintain a diverse Pareto set approximation, because if all of the points are just resulting in one point here, we don't know the other solutions that are available. So we want to maintain the diversity. Okay, then how do we talk about how to prevent the non-dominated solutions from being lost? If this is a good solution, in the next generation, you don't want to lose it. How do you keep that? Okay, like the way we kept elite members in the earlier case. Okay, so those are the three important aspects that are to be considered in multi-objective evolutionary algorithms when compared to single objective evolutionary algorithms. So there's a lot of science and a lot of mathematical or algorithmic approaches that are available to take care of these 3 points. Okay, but I will try to illustrate that with again another reservoir called Bhadra Reservoir in Karnataka state. Okay, it is now meant for, we try to use it for both hydropower as well as irrigation. Okay, hydropower itself is from 3 different powerhouses, one that is going through irrigation canal, left bank, right bank, and one that is going through left bank, and then one is going through riverbed. this will have higher head causing the flow. Okay, so the turbine capacities are also specified here, and the irrigated area is also specified here. Okay, and third objective, which I'll discuss briefly, is river water quality. Okay, so for this dam, again we try to look at, there are two objective functions now. One is minimize irrigation deficit, again for monthly operation to illustrate to you. Okay, and this is the water that is released for right bank canal, and this is a left bank canal, and this is the water that is released for right bank canal. And there is also producing hydropower. Apart from these two, hydropower is also produced from bed level. So hydropower production will have 3 turbine houses for every month, like that for 12 months. So maximize hydropower, minimize irrigation deficit, subject to all the constraints like system dynamics continuity equation, storage bounds, maximum power production limits, irrigation demands, water quality requirements. All those things will come into picture. So large number of constraints are there. Okay, all these constraints are shown here. Don't try to read them, because now you can see that there are large number 1, 2, and 5, 7, 9, 10. 10 sets of constraints for each month. So 10 into 12, 120. Okay, and then we looked at the both objective functions and we try to generate the trade-off curves. Okay, so after generation 50, these blue dots, blue circles are showing the Pareto optimal front, and by about 200 generation, these black rhombuses are showing. By about 500 generation, we converged on the Pareto optimal front. Okay, what does this point mean? If I take one point here, okay, what does this point mean is that, sorry, if you look at this F1 value, okay, hydropower produced is this much and the irrigation deficit is this much. Okay, and if you try to slightly go here, you may get much better value, but it will violate one of the constraints. Okay, so we are trying to get the best compromise solution. Any red dot here is a compromise solution. Here what is happening? You are producing more hydropower, but there is larger amount of deficit. Okay, whereas if you talk about this point, you are having less amount of deficit, irrigation deficit, but there is very little hydropower produced. So you can give these multiple solutions to the operator, and then depending on their priority, do they want to give more importance to hydropower or do they want to give more importance to irrigation? They can decide the best solution in any of these red dots. So if you just take one red dot, that red dot itself tells you lots of stories, because this is hydropower produced total, but how much water to be released in each month, that to each turbine, left bank turbine, right bank turbine, etc. All that details are available here. Okay, so for one optimal point, if you take, okay, you have the corresponding operating policy in each month, how much water to be released or what is the storage that should be maintained. Okay, so what we did, the same thing like what we did for Hirakud, we try to again look at for mean flows below average and mean flows above average, and this as standard deviation. Okay, so for 3 different scenarios, we try to come up with the trade-off curves. So these are the 3 trade-off curves. Okay, for scenario dry season, normal season, and a wet season. Okay, what is the hydropower produced? What is the irrigation deficit? Okay, and if you take simply one point, for example, if this point, okay, that point itself is a corresponding rule curve like this. And what we have also shown here is that if the operator decides that he will give equal priority for hydropower and irrigation, then what should be the rule curve? And if he gives irrigation the higher priority, what should be the rule curve? And if he gives hydropower the high priority, what should be the rule curve? That too for dry season, for normal season, and for wet season. Like this, we can try to, what happened once we have formulated the genetic algorithm, then we are solving it again and again for various priorities or various inflow scenarios. That's all. Okay, problem is same. The genetic algorithm implemented code is same. We are simply changing the inputs. Okay, and that gets you this kind of rule curves, optimal operating rule curves in a multi-objective context for reservoir operation. extend this logic. Okay, if you have two objective functions, this is the way we have done. And what we also did, I mean, for all within that, with hydropower, if you are releasing water, how much should be released from left bank, how much should be from right bank, all these things will come as variable values from the genetic algorithm. Okay, thought we can as well have three objectives. Third objective being water quality. So the Pareto optimal front will be three-dimensional. Objective function 1, 2, and 3. Okay, there are too many points to confuse the decision maker. So we use the crowding distance mechanism to reduce the number of alternatives that we can give to the operator. Okay, K-means clustering technique was used for that. Okay, that's how we came up with this kind of Pareto optimal front with three objectives using multi-objective genetic algorithm optimization. So that's how we can try to use the genetic algorithms for multi-objective optimization. It's a very powerful nonlinear optimization technique. They can also be used for powerful search techniques. Search techniques in the sense for multi-objective optimization. We found that we can try to get as many number of compromise solutions as possible, which is excellent for the decision maker. When talking about the future scope, I have basically demonstrated this with binary coded genetic algorithm, but we have also tried solving this large scale multi-objective optimization problem using real coded GA. It gives some advantages in the sense that a priori you don't have to decide what is the accuracy desired for each variable. Okay, you can still get them done through real coded GA. And what I have shown you is for multi-objective single reservoir operation. But what we can extend this is for multi-objective multi-reservoir operation. For example, if you take any basin, you may have more number of dams. How do we operate all of them in a multi-objective context? For example, if you take Krishna River Basin, we have about 18 major reservoirs. So how do we operate them in sync? Okay, so that the more total benefit is good, like Krishna Tribunal or Krishna Basin Authority would look for, or Godavari Basin Authority. Like that, the Basin Authority would like to look for the overall optimization of all the reservoirs operation together, rather than looking at the benefit from one single reservoir. We have also used many other evolution algorithms like swarm intelligence, PSO, differential evolution, ant colony optimization. Many other algorithms are also used to solve similar kind of reservoir operation problems. So one major reference that I wanted to give to you is this. Okay, this is an open access paper publication, so you can free download this paper. As you can notice somewhere, it has about 58 pages. Okay, it's a very large, lengthy paper. It tries to critically review the evolutionary algorithms, swarm intelligence methods, and their applications in water resources engineering as on 2020. So most of the prominent research that has happened in this domain is explained and elaborated with pseudocode for each of the algorithms, swarm intelligence as well as evolutionary algorithms. So you may want to refer to this to get more insight into all these algorithms. My demonstration is for reservoir operation, but these genetic algorithms can be used for any nonlinear optimization problem. Thank you. I'm done, and I'm willing to take questions now.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful and informative lecture. Now I request participants, if you have any kind of query or question, you can either unmute yourself or either you can write in the chat box also.
Yeah. And if it is written in the chat box, Darshan, I request you to read it.